So I've gone on thinking about the concept of not not caring what other people think or not needing people to like you. And as I've mentioned in one of my other videos, the popular view being circulated right now is that rejection shouldn't matter to you because we're not cavemen anymore. Therefore, if you're rejected by your tribe, you won't die. But I don't know that that's actually the truth. Uh, when I look around, even at the people who often espouse this view, and even if I'm honest, Spike Spencer himself, and if he does come across this video, I really hope he won't take what I'm about to say as any kind of insult of him. But the thing I've noticed is that his career, and the careers of many people, are very much contingent upon uh, persuading people to like you. If you apply for a job, and your boss doesn't like you, well, your potential boss doesn't like you, you're not getting the job, so you're not getting an income. And that's okay if it happens once or twice, or even 100 times, but if it happens for your entire life, and that's your only plan for survival, you're not going to be able to look after yourself. You're probably going to end up homeless if you don't have anyone to look after you. And then having somebody to look after you is contingent upon at least being likable enough that somebody would want to help you. And if nobody and you might say, well, no, I'll just form my own business. But if you form your own business, and what I've had to learn actually is that if you want to form and maintain a business well, you actually have to persuade many people to like you, or at least care about you enough, and care about what you're doing enough that they will actually want to buy products from you. And so I feel like this expectation that we should live our lives as though the opinions of other people are completely irrelevant is actually dishonest. It's not even consistent with how most people live, even if they claim to believe in that philosophy. And I feel like people could very easily hear what I'm saying and misconstrue that to mean that I'm saying we should, continue to agonize over whether or not people like us or to worry about it. But I don't actually believe in that idea either. Rather, I think we're better off believing, and I think if most people think really honestly about what they do with their lives, about it, like, I think they'll agree with me. We're better off believing that we can be liked and we can be accepted. We're better off believing that that's actually possible. That maybe some people won't like us, but some people will. And even if we're very difficult to like, and even if we struggle with our interpersonal skills, that we have the opportunity to learn better ones. If you can believe that with, I think, credence, then I think you will be greatly less distressed when it turns out that somebody doesn't like you. And if I think about how my mental health has shifted over time, back when I not only believed that being liked was of vital importance, but I also believed I had none of the skills to achieve that, I was very unhappy. I was depressed, I was anxious, I was angry, I was, I think, just about sociopathic. But as I gradually came to increasingly believe that I was capable of being liked, I became increasingly capable of empathy. And I think it's because if we convince ourselves that we're meant to be okay with not being liked, what we're essentially doing is asking us to believe that every single person in the world won't like us, and that we're meant to be fine with that before anyone ever could like us. Which is actually, that's not even true. Even the clingiest, neediest person in the world will be able to find some other clingy, needy people to be friends or to form relationships with. I think we have a cultural tendency to undervalue friendship as a perfectly valid form of relationship. And I think that we tend to assume that having many interactions might devalue and many different kinds of friendship and relationship will somehow devalue the relationships we do have. And I don't, like, as I've gone on, what I've found is that as I've tried to make my range of social life increasingly broad, is that my mental health has improved. I find that I feel increasingly emotionally stable as I develop more and more friendships and more acquaintanceships, and so on. And if I think about why that might be, I think it is at least partly because being able to have such a breadth of different connections with people not only emulates, I think, the kind of village relationships that people once had, that were, I think, much more psychologically normative for people to have, but also having so many friendships assures me that I am likable by someone. Um, and but not a but it, I feel like it's not enough just to say that. I actually believe this idea that you have to be 100% self-sufficient before it's okay to be in a friendship or relationship is, or to believe that you need to be 100% self-sufficient before you can be okay with being in a relationship. I think that's contradictory. If you really believe you don't need anyone, if you really don't want people to like you, why should you care about having friendships or relationships? Like, if you really didn't want that or need that, you wouldn't be looking for it. But like, I think people try to convince themselves that they don't because it creates the impression of invulnerability. And being vulnerable is a lot more scary. And if I think back throughout my life over people who hold to this ideology of you shouldn't need anyone to like you, um, and people don't matter, if I think about who they are, the vibe I get from them is that there's always a sort of subtle undercurrent of anger and sadness. It's not obvious, and they've clearly done a lot of work on themselves to manage those emotions. But if I think about why that might be there, it is because on some level I think we all know that it should be okay to want to be liked. We should be allowed to want that, and we shouldn't have to go through life believing that people will by default dislike us if we want to be liked. Like, I feel like naturally if you believe in this, you will be unhappy. Because you will be denying the possibility that you could ever have the kind of fulfilling, the sense of. And I think the predominant reason why most people don't find the whole you don't need anyone to like you ideology not absolutely destructive or toxic is probably because they already have at least enough normal friendships in their life, and probably a reasonably normal relationship with their parents, so it doesn't pose a massive problem for them to feel like being liked doesn't really matter. And there is an extent to which it is right to not make it your whole world, because there is going to be a very big difference between whether or not people like you and who you are on the inside. For example, a person might, for their whole life, secretly donate to charity. Now, no one will know because they did it secretly, but it doesn't mean that they didn't do it and that they weren't a nice person deep down. But outwardly, people might, not know it, and therefore assume that the person is probably selfish. And I still hold to the idea that typically the judgments people make over one another are more a statement about themselves than the person they're actually judging. I still believe that, but that doesn't change the value of human relationships themselves, or their importance to psychological well-being. And personally, I have found the whole, you need to not care whether or not people like you. You need to be whole on your own, before you can have a relationship. For me, that ideology in of itself was unfortunately quite damaging throughout my life, because it made me feel inordinately ashamed and uncomfortable with my own desire to be liked. And it made me feel like there was something wrong with me if I wanted people to like me. And so it actually exacerbated the feelings of inadequacy I already had, and the lack of faith I had that I could ever be liked. And it is a contradictory ideology, in that you're essentially saying to somebody, before you're allowed to sit down and eat, you have to stop feeling hungry. Or you know, before you're allowed to put on a jacket, you have to stop feeling cold. It doesn't really make sense to say this. What would be better, I think, is actually to, if our culture dropped this notion and replaced it with working on actually developing real interpersonal skills. And admittedly, everybody is going to differ on what they feel interpersonal skills really mean or look like, because everybody has slightly different things that they're comfortable with. But, for my part, I, for a long time, lived with this erroneous belief that for people to like and accept me, I had to hide who I really was. And I lived with this belief that everybody was expecting me to be emotionless. Partly because of this idea that wanting to be liked is wrong. I ended up doing a lot of, I think, self-sabotaging behaviors, trying to convince myself that I could be just fine if no one ever liked me. And it exacerbated things. It made it harder for people to get along with me. And it meant that there were times when people were actually trying very hard to get along with me, and I just pushed them away instead of actually hearing them out, because I thought, no, this is a trap. They're trying to trick me into revealing vulnerabilities so they can make fun of me. And look, some of the time that's going to be true, but the greater truth is that people who play these kinds of sadistic pranks are actually wrong. They're not. The fact that they're capable of doing that doesn't actually mean that it's wrong to be emotionally vulnerable and honest with people. It's actually, well, by doing that, they're almost proving the exact opposite. They're proving that human vulnerability is so natural that such a prank can be done in the first place. And so I think, at least within myself, I believe that if I want to become happier and more effective as a person, I actually need to not simply worry less about what people think, but maybe to listen to Fred Rogers a little more in how he teaches people that not only are they allowed to want to be loved, but they are actually lovable. That you can be accepted as you are. I think that is a more important message. Not that everyone will accept you, but there are at least some people who can. And, yeah, there's an extent to which it mightn't matter, because you can't, like, even if some people don't like you, you can just move on to form friendships with other people, and that's fine. But, you know, if I think about all of the times I've been romantically rejected or had to go through a breakup, the thing that made it really hard for me to get over was not just the breakup itself or just the rejection itself. It was the sensation that my grief over the loss was somehow proof and evidence that I couldn't be loved and accepted, on top of their rejection. And if I could go back in time and speak to my younger self as she went through all of these different points in her life, it probably would have been to say, no, you don't have to believe that people are right when they tell you that your desire to be loved is ridiculous, you can ignore those people. And you should ignore those people because they're lying to you. They are wrong and they're probably sick. So, yeah, that's what's on my mind right now. Amongst other things, but, it's not a good time.